There's been an almost 2-week-long strike in the state of West Virginia in all 55 counties. And the reason why the strike is going on, quite frankly, is because teachers are tired of being taken advantage of. And they're sick of it. And their strike is really substantial because more than 250,000 children weren't able to attend school because of the strike, which kind of lit a fire under the butts of legislators in the state. However, even when union leaders announced that teachers would return to work as an act of good faith after the governor announced a plan that would actually raise wages of teachers by 5% in order to accommodate increases to cost of living and an increase to monthly health insurance premiums, well, teachers still decided to remain on strike. And the reason why they decided to still remain on strike and not choose to go back to school as an act of good faith, since the governor did demonstrate that he did want to raise their wages, was because it looked as though they weren't actually going to get what was promised to them. And according to the New York Times, Senate President Mitch Carmichael has expressed deep skepticism about the plan, which was not on the agenda for consideration by the Senate Finance Committee as of Friday morning. Mr. Carmichael has suggested that any extra revenue should go toward shoring up the state's health insurance program rather than toward raises for teachers. So basically, to break down what happened, the governor had announced that he would sign a bill raising wages of teachers by 5%. The Republican-controlled House passed that bill overwhelmingly, but when it got to the Senate, this one asshole decided, you know what, I don't really care about teachers, so we're not going to pass this bill. Now, what did the teachers in West Virginia do as a result? Well, they raised hell. They continued the strike. They protested in front of the state's capitol every single day and even occupied the state's capitol at one point. And as Brandy Bochna-Tuck writes in an op-ed for PBS NewsHour, you simply cannot understand the intensity of a labor strike until you actually live through it. Since day one, hundreds of teachers stand outside the House doors, chanting continuously for hours. I find it to be one of the most compelling moments of my life. The building is filled with this eerie roar of educators fighting for a voice united. We are in this position because education is not a priority to our government. There are currently over 700 teaching vacancies in West Virginia. Connect that to the fact that our salaries rank 48th in the nation. Workers are on strike not only over pay raises, but healthcare benefits as well. The state-controlled Public Employees Insurance Agency, which regulates healthcare premiums, is at the root of the problem. So really, there's a lot going on. They're not being paid enough. Their healthcare insurance premiums are increasing, and they're just standing up and they're doing what needed to be done. Now, this strike would have already ended had the Senate, and Carmichael in particular, actually passed the bill that the governor promised the legislature would pass. But since it didn't, they're saying, give us what you promised us, or we're going to remain on strike. Now, finally, as of today, Governor James Justice actually did sign a bill into law that gave teachers a raise by 5%. And as far as we know, since they now are getting what they were promised, which, again, 5% raise, that's not a lot. That's not. But they're getting it finally, and as a result of them winning, the strike is presumably now over. Now, here's what's different this time. Quote, unlike a previous proposed raise that was backed by Mr. Justice and the State House of Representatives, the deal reached on Tuesday had the support of Mitch Carmichael, the president of the more conservative state Senate. Mr. Carmichael said the deal would probably lead to painful cuts in other parts of the state budget. Another Republican senator, Craig Blair, said in a conference committee that Medicaid would be among the areas cut. So this is what drives me nuts. So finally, when he reluctantly gets on board with this bill and chooses to raise the wages of teachers in West Virginia, which he should have done to begin with, now they're saying, well, since we can't screw you over this way, we're going to screw over residents of West Virginia in another way. First and foremost, it's not just teachers that were affected. If you don't take care of teachers, that harms students and everyone else in the state of West Virginia. So this wasn't just about teachers in West Virginia, even though they were the ones on strike. Teachers are important for the future of our country. We need them. So teachers are important, but since they no longer can screw over teachers, they're going to try to do what they can to screw over other citizens in the state of West Virginia. And if I were in West Virginia, I would be protesting cuts to Medicaid now. Because if you're trying to tell me that they can't possibly not cut a social safety net program, I call bullshit. We know their priorities are probably ass backwards. Now, there's another component to this story that really got under my skin, and yes, I'm going to acknowledge the irony, because I haven't talked about this issue because I've been in the process of setting up the new studio for the show, so I haven't been recording. We've just been looping the older content that we had that was pre-recorded. But mainstream media, who runs news 24/7, I mean, they were virtually silent. As Fair explains, MSNBC's big names completely ignore West Virginia teachers' strike. This strike was monumental. Teachers in all 55 districts in the state of West Virginia were on strike for nearly 2 weeks, and the 3 biggest so-called liberal hosts on mainstream television were silent. The only way I think you can get them to cover this is if you said that there was some type of Russian influence. Otherwise, they don't give a damn about this, because this West Virginia strike, it's not good for ratings. It's not. People probably are ambivalent about it. Most people probably don't even know about it, but this is important. I mean, this is organized labor coming together to fight for a cause, and they won. I mean, this is something that can be emulated in other states. If teachers are getting screwed, if anyone in any industry is getting screwed, they could replicate this strategy that was used by teachers in West Virginia and potentially be successful in their state. So it's important, especially if you're a so-called liberal like Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, you should care about this. But they were silent. Now, there were a couple of, quick mentions here and there on Velshi and Rule, I think. I'm probably butchering their names, but, on MSNBC. But, I mean, this was talked about quite a bit in print outlets like New York Times, even CNN. But MSNBC, silent. Unbelievable. But getting back to the strike, let me just say that to every single teacher who was protesting, who was on strike every single day, that strike made me feel so optimistic and hopeful, because at a time when citizens in this country are getting screwed over in multiple ways, I mean, we're getting our taxes increased as a result of tax cuts going to the wealthy. We're losing healthcare subsidies. I mean, we're just getting screwed over. So to see people come together in such a significant fashion and demand justice, it made me feel so hopeful and optimistic. So I couldn't wait to talk about this and get back, because this is something that I think everyone should care about. This is important. This is history in the making right here. And what I hope is that we don't see this story end with West Virginia. Hopefully West Virginia and workers there, teachers there specifically, hopefully they catalyze a nationwide movement. So teachers across the country and any other worker in other industries being taken advantage of stand up and fight back, because they can win this way. So this story to me was incredibly inspirational. I just wish that the mainstream media would have been more diligent, or just covered it at all. Especially the 3 hosts who bring in the most eyeballs to the television screen. It's insane to me how they don't care about this. I don't understand that.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.